Well, a Georgia appeals court has agreed to review the ruling that allowed District Attorney Fani Willis in Fulton County, Georgia, to stay on that state's election interference case against Donald Trump and 18 co-defendants. This move could significantly push back the timeline for a trial. Trump's attorney, in a statement to ABC, says the former president looks forward to arguing for Willis's removal and for the case's dismissal as well. This comes after Judge Scott McAfee, who's overseeing this trial, agreed to allow Fani Willis to remain as one of the prosecutors as long as one of her top prosecutors, Nathan Wade, stepped down. This all came in response to revelations that those two had had an affair. Just days ago, Wade told ABC News Live Prime anchor Linsey Davis in an exclusive interview that he does not feel this case is in jeopardy.
So you said you didn't want to violate the public's trust. I'm curious, do you think that you've done any kind of damage to this case?
None at all. None at all.
Even the public perception of it?
My private life became the focal point of the case. And my private life has nothing to do with the merits of that prosecution.
Well, all this comes just one day after the federal judge, that's the federal judge overseeing that classified documents case against Trump in Florida, Trump appointee Judge Eileen Cannon, she postponed that case indefinitely until the resolution of all the related legal matters having to do with classified information in that case. So for more, let's bring in ABC News contributor and former Georgia prosecutor Chris Timmons. So Chris, you know, is Nathan Wade right that nothing that happened in that national soap opera, his relationship with Fani Willis and the judge trying to get to the bottom of it, that's not going to threaten this case? Is this case going to be okay?
No, it's a huge problem. I mean, I think, Terry, one of the things you've got to realize is that by the Court of Appeals today accepting the case for an appeal, allowing an interlocutory or kind of a mid-case appeal, they just set the clock back by 6 months at the very least. Now, if we get to 6 months, we're getting to November, and I talked to a couple of constitutional law professors today. They indicated that there's no way that Georgia could legally try President Trump if he was reelected and a sitting president in January. So it's possibly a death blow, and that's all of Nathan Wade's fault, because if he hadn't engaged in this improper relationship, we wouldn't have this 6-month layoff. Or at this point, we've had this issue hanging over the case since January. So respectfully, with regard to the merits of the case, he's right. It didn't affect the merits of the case. But in terms of the overall health of the case and as it's proceeding, he's created a massive delay.
Got it. Okay, that's a good distinction. But let me ask what the appeals court is going to do here. What's the standard for them to say, no, the trial court's wrong, and under Georgia law, whatever the appearance of impropriety or the conflict of interest or whatever they might be, the judge called it the odor of mendacity that came out of these witnesses in his hearing. What is it that the appeals court will be looking for to see if they should kick her off the case?
So, Terry, I'm looking for musicians to be a member of my band, which will be called Odor of Mendacity. But that said, what they're going to be looking at in this particular case, they're going to be looking at two issues. They're going to be looking at the conflict of interest issue. They're also going to be looking at what they refer to as the forensic misconduct issue. The conflict of interest issue is pretty clear. They're going to be making a decision on whether McAfee, when he said, you know, an appearance isn't enough, or at least didn't find an appearance here, whether he was correct on that. The other thing they're looking at is whether those comments that Fani Willis made to the church, I guess back in January, whether that was enough to get her off the case because it created some sort of cloud over the defendant. So odor of mendacity aside, we don't have to worry about an odor of mendacity at the Court of Appeals, but we do have to worry about those two legal issues and them taking a look at it.
And we have to worry about your band hitting the road with that name. But let me get serious once again and ask you, in this case and others, the timeline is so important to so many people. People are really eager to see Donald Trump tried and convicted before the election, or tried and acquitted, whatever. But should a judge, should any court of appeals, should the Supreme Court care about the partisan political interests in what timetable should be going forward in these cases, whether it's the Republican preference or the Democratic preference?
Yeah, so Terry, it's a tough question. I mean, because you're thinking on the one hand, Donald Trump's a defendant. He should be treated like every other defendant in the criminal justice system. He shouldn't be giving any preference. He shouldn't lose any sort of status beyond that. His case should proceed as it normally would. But at the same time, I mean, these are the most important cases that are occurring right now in our country because they could affect who the leader of the free world is. So you expect a little bit of special treatment there. I was a little surprised that the Court of Appeals decided to take this case. I thought that the issues looked pretty clear, that Judge McAfee's ruling was not clear error, that it wouldn't be something that needed to be overturned. But at the same time, I don't know whether the Court of Appeals will expedite the case because of the importance of the matter at stake.
Yeah, and Chris, if I could just raise what happened in court in New York City yesterday when Stormy Daniels, the adult film actress, took the witness stand and described, I think pretty gleefully, in rather lurid detail, her sexual encounter with President Trump. And Trump's team moved for mistrial, saying this isn't relevant to the charges, which are falsifying business records and a campaign finance violation, and they moved for mistrial. What do you think of it? The judge, in fact, acknowledged he kind of lost control of his courtroom for a while there because she was talking about a lot of things that probably aren't relevant to any of that. Do you think that Trump has grounds for a mistrial or on appeal?
I don't, Terry. I mean, I think for it to be a mistrial, it's got to be something that, taints the entire fairness of the entire proceeding. And here, I think everybody knew from the beginning that what we were talking about here were hush money payments to cover up the fact, or at least the allegation anyway, that Stormy Daniels and the former president of the United States had sex. And so, sex was coming into it. Now, how graphic it was going to be, maybe the judge should have calmed that down a little bit. But at the same time, we're assessing her credibility. And some of her credibility is her ability to describe exactly what went on between her and the former president.
Yuck. But yes, I think that's a really good legal point. I actually think that makes good sense. Chris Timmons, great to see you. Thanks very much.
You too, Terry. Thank you.
Well, now let's bring the big story to our panel. Joining us today, ABC News contributor and op-ed columnist for the Los Angeles Times, LZ Granderson, ABC News contributor, Democratic strategist Valencia Johnson, former Republican Congressman from Virginia, Barbara Comstock, and ABC News contributor and Sirius XM radio host Mike Muse. So, LZ, let me start with you. Trump's strategy in Georgia, obviously, he wants to discredit this prosecution. And the judge did hear a lot of testimony that wasn't pretty for the prosecutors, but originally said they can stay on the case. Now the appeals court wants to take a look. Do you think his strategy's working?
Well, the strategy is working because remember the strategy is delay, delay, delay. And if you look at it in the larger, kind of context of it all, this is something that we've seen him do with the other cases as well, that, whether it's the judge or the prosecuting team themselves, he's gone after the actual people who are accusing him of these crimes as part of his larger grievance. And so, yes, I would say his strategy is working because we have more delays.
And Barbara, these delays, Trump's opponents hope the legal cases against him will derail his election campaign. That's one of the reasons these timelines are so important. So many people who don't support Trump, they want to see him convicted before the voters go to the polls. And then, of course, the answer is, well, really, the only way you're going to really defeat Donald Trump and Trumpism, if you want to, is the old-fashioned way, at the ballot box. What do you think of that argument?
Yeah, well, the American people are going to have to be the jury in this case, and they have heard a lot of these things, certainly in the Georgia case. They've heard the tapes, so they will have to be the jury. And then when he loses in November, this trial can still go forward no matter who the prosecutor is, and all of his co-defendants who can't be pardoned, whether he wins or loses, are going to be in the dock with him.
Yeah, it's a great point that if Trump doesn't win the presidency, all these cases will come at him same way. Valencia, so what do you make of the notion that Democrats are putting too much energy, too much hope in this, when really it's going to take a massive grassroots, passionate campaign to get everybody out if they're going to beat Trump?
Listen, I think it's a twofold strategy for Democrats. You see the Biden campaign playing an offense right now. They are actually building that ground game in Georgia and all of the other key states, while at the same time allowing for the system to do what it needs to do when it comes to Donald Trump. This is a delay tactic. And as LZ said, it's going to continue to delay, but the Biden campaign will use this as an opportunity to paint the contrast of what can be done when they are if they are reelected, and they're building that ground game in Georgia while this plays out.
And thank you, Linsey. And Mike, you know, back to Georgia. So this relationship between Fani Willis and Nathan Wade, which was kind of spilled into the public in that hearing for several days, it may, as Chris Timmons just said, regardless of how the appeals court rules, damage this case beyond repair. Does it also damage it? Do you think it also damaged it in the public mind?
No, I don't. And I think Judge McAfee reconciled that in his remarks in saying that the case could go on with Fani Willis at the helm as long as she or Nathan Wade stepped down. I think that was also, too, what Chris Timmons was alluding to in a conversation with him. I think once the case is permitted to go on after the appeal goes forward, I think then at that time the prosecution will be able to have the opportunity to reframe this case where it is and remove it from the salaciousness of what it has become.
Yeah, no question. The facts alleged are desperately serious. Hey, fellas, find me 11,000 votes is right at the heart of that. Mike, LZ, Linsey, and Barbara, thanks very much.